how far would you go to make an impact in the world? The 10 incredible entrepreneurs will visit our campus to tell their stories and share the steps they took to be catalysts for change. The Entrepreneur Leadership Series, the most valuable one-credit class you will ever take.
I'm very excited to be introducing Adam Morgan today. He is a wealth of knowledge. We got to chat with him a little bit at dinner, and he has tons of insight. He has 26 years of experience in creativity and strategy. He's the executive creative director at Adobe currently. He's been working there for 7.5 years. And then prior to that, he was working at a few different ad agencies for 19 years of his career. In 2014, he was named a 40 Under 40 business leader by the Utah Business Magazine and the Utah Ad Professional of the Year. He's an author and a podcast host, and we're super excited to have him present, so I'll turn the time over to Adam.
Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, I gotta find my clicker here. All right, there we go. All right, so what I'm gonna talk to you today about, the first half, is my career. And I think that's what they wanted to know. Like, how did you get where you were? What did you do? I just suck in. Sorry for the first time there. Hello, hello. So I'm just going to talk about my career, and then I'm going to talk about creative leadership, because I think it's a critical thing in today's business world. And I know many of you may not be necessarily business majors, but I think a lot of you are business minors. And so just understanding the value of creativity in whatever you build, I think will be critical. So I'm going to get on a soapbox, because I have the mic and I have an hour. And I will talk to you about what I'm passionate about and why I think it should matter for you too. All right, I'm gonna turn it on. I'm gonna start first with a video. And this is a video we did at Adobe. And I think it truly encompasses something that drove me early in my career, which is the value of creativity. And while this video you're gonna watch is absolutely about what we typically call the creative act, which is design or writing or photography or video. I'm going to talk more about how it goes beyond that, but I just want you to at least get the feeling that I felt as being a part of this creative movement.
We are the creative class. We are alone in our rooms with one dream among us. We tell stories about boys and girls who learn to fly, and we make those stories come as true as our minds can will them. Our teachers are comic books and cartoons. Every bedroom a bat cave, every den the mutant lair. Our gallery is hung with magnets on the fridge. We stand on your corner and wonder, what if we could play for a living? What if we could use chalk to make this sidewalk more interesting? What if there are others out here watching the trees turn into polka dots? We fill wastebaskets with weak ideas. Our cash goes into canvas and acrylic colors, and we wonder, how much bologna can we eat before it's bad for us? Can we bottle the smell of fear and sell it? We paint a mural of the ocean, and in the wall we find the shell around a tiny pearl. We share it between us, it warms our hands. Let's use it to guide us in 2s and 3s. Let's make something there in the dark, so we're not afraid of the dark ever again. We are the photo negative, and we are what develops. There are 40 of us making this work after hours because we figured out a way to do it better. Don't say that it's impossible and that there's no budget for glitter. Give us a wheel to reinvent. Let's make a lighter, cleaner water jug for disaster relief. Let's turn sustainable design into design that sustains us all. We are millions of us armed with drop cloths and wood glue and a vision. We will silkscreen a banner that flies colors you've never heard of. Let's raise high the beams and set the roof on fire. Let's send a ripple from here to New Delhi. We can start a rally with a website, a revolution with a JPEG, and we are more than the sum of our parts. We get presidents elected. We are an army. We are alone in our rooms. There is a story in all of us, and we are going to make it. We are the creative class.
So that speaks to me. I want to be a part of the creative class. And I think if you noticed in that video, it's not just the art, it's ideas. And ideas are really what drove me early on in my career. just the thought of like, I started out my career, I went to university for chemical engineering because I thought I was going to invent something like Kevlar, right? And then of course I got sick of the labs, but I moved over to advertising and design because I wanted to come up with ideas faster and more often. And that's what drove me in my career. Early on, one of the first jobs I got was, I didn't know what I was doing, but I went to this school newspaper and I just got a job designing ads. And I remember there was one late night, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Communication Arts Magazine or The One Show. They're basically like, The One Show is like the Oscars for advertising, where every year they compile a book of all the best ads and ideas and marketing. And I remember just late one night, sitting there in that newspaper. No one else was there, they were all gone, because I was just there late, working on a project. And just reading through these books and seeing all these amazing big ideas that people had come up with over the years. And it just inspired me. And I'd look, and inside there, they'd always list like the people who'd helped with it. And inevitably, there's always a creative director on there. And I thought, you know what, that's it. That's when I came up with my dream. I wanted to be a creative director. I wanted to be able to come up with big ideas and work with teams and work with technology and do whatever it took to just do something that, someone would remember. So that's where my career started out. Now, I know this is one slide and it just has a bunch of logos on there, but from there, out of school, I ended up getting a job at my first agency at Dallin Smith White back in 1995. And back then, it was the Intel account, and I worked for a year just doing silly ads and stuff for microprocessors of all boring things. But it was an amazing experience. And as I worked, through different, some of these are big names in advertising world, like Publicis and McCann Erickson and other things. But for 19 years, I worked in ad agency life. And ad agency life is very fast-paced, and it's amazing because you're surrounded by so many brilliant people, people who are really good at strategy or design or writing or storytelling or video or whatever it was. Like, I was just surrounded by talented people for a long time, and just worked my way up from a junior all the way up till, I finally, one day, it was at McKann Erickson that I finally became a creative director. And then worked my way up. The last agency I was at was Thomas Arts, where I worked with Russell Fisher, if any of you work with him as well. But anyhow, that was the last agency I worked at, where I ran a team, a large team in the agency of 55, and just that's all we did is we'd come up with ideas all day long and just try new things and look at things from a different perspective. And it was this creative drive in me to really look for big ideas that drove me, and I loved it. And then this is just some of the work over the years. And some of it has won big awards. I've been in different annuals. One of the biggest honors that I had was AdWeek, if you know of that. It's like the magazine for all advertising. A year or so ago, they named me on the top 100 creative in the world, which was pretty phenomenal to get an accolade like that. But anyhow, these are just some headlines and some ideas of just some ads over the years. But then something changed, and it was probably about a little more than 10 years ago, something called the design-led movement. Because up until then, all the creative people went to agencies, and it was because it was just kind of this, it was a place for rebels and misfits and people who could just try different things. And about 10 years ago, this design-led movement started with, design thinking, if you guys are into that, of just understanding the value of innovation in the process of creating products. But it changed more than just the way people and businesses value products. It really changed the world for people like me, because going in-house at a brand back then was just seen as taboo. But with the design-led movement, suddenly CEOs and people in business started to understand a little bit more that there is value in design. It's not just lipstick on a pig. It's not just window dressing. There's more to it. And that is when finally more creative people and creative leaders started to get a seat at the design table. And for me, that led to Adobe. And now at Adobe, I've been there 7.5 years. We run a huge team. We create all the outward-facing experiences that you would have for a brand. The website, the advertising, videos, email programs, banner ads, social bits, blogs, everything in between. We create all the stuff for that. So my team does the design, the video, the writing, all that same stuff, but for a big brand. And what's changed is that now creative leaders and creative directors have a greater seat at the table, at least in brands. And why that's important is because now we have a chance to make a bigger impact on how those ideas are going to be expressed, what the brand represents, bigger moments. Because this is something that's super important that I'll get to in a minute in creative leadership, which is, and sorry, this is just some of the work at Adobe that we work on. I'm going to come back to that. But the thing that's really, really important, in part, that it was part of my journey, that I want you to just consider, is that for 2 decades, I focused solely on emotional, creative experiences, customer moments, people watching movies, understanding pop culture, really truly digging deep into how people feel about experiences, especially as they interact with the brand, right? And that's critical to build up my creative acumen, right? I had to. It's part of the job to really dig in deep and understand those things. Like when you talk about that one show that inspired me to be a creative director, I ended up getting the whole entire, I have every single book, like all 40 volumes of it. And some of them were really hard to find books, but I studied those things every single day and memorized most of the campaigns. So that later on you could say, oh, the Timex campaign of 1996, yeah, I know exactly what that one's all about. Or some other brand, if they made a great splash with an ad campaign, I knew what it was. And really training my brain to understand all of those emotional connections really, really helped me create great work that connects with customers, great work that people care about. And this is really important. As part of that, this is an interesting story of, actually started with Russell. We had a retreat. This is probably 10 years ago. We had a retreat, and I was pitching some ideas to him and some of his partners. And he asked a really interesting question, because I was showing him, here's all these great ideas and all this stuff. And he's like, you know what, my boss, who is I don't know, did he come from sales or did he just come from? A finance guy, okay. So a finance guy that just didn't believe in creativity. And so Russell asked me a specific question. He's like, why would I go with the super creative project rather than just a straightforward project? Like, I can't just go off of your word. I can't just go off of what you believe, because I've got to sell it up to my boss here. So what's the difference? Like, why should people care about a creative idea? And that started off a 7-year journey where I did all this research and wrote a book that was finally published a couple years ago that's all about proving the value of creativity to business people, but with science, right? Nothing subjective. Like, I had to interview neuroscientists and look up all these really boring scientific studies to try and understand what's happening when a customer interacts with a brand and what is going on inside their brains. And so it was a fascinating journey, and that really helped me understand a lot more about the value of emotional experiences. Since then, so that I've been at Adobe 7.5 years, working, creating all this great stuff, but 3 years ago, we're now getting into season 3, another thing that I noticed is that there is a lot of stuff out there on the internet of how to be a better writer, how to be a better designer, how to make, better videos, whatever it may be. But there was a huge gap in terms of people who were leading creative teams, people who were creative leaders, people who believed in ideas, and they'd already learned the craft. They'd gone through all those years of really understanding how to do it better, and now they had bigger problems, right? They're like, how do I scale my team? How do I understand value and analytics to prove the value of my creative team? How do I build the right environment at a business or a company? And so, because that was one of our audiences at Adobe, which is creative leaders at big, tech brands and agencies and whatnot. So I started this Real Creative Leadership podcast. Now it's a video podcast on YouTube, every podcast channel, or there's a website. You can go to realcreativeleadership.com. And there's like a curriculum on this where we go through every year of hitting all the different points of things that you need to learn to be a better creative leader. And I bring on CMOs, executive creative directors from companies like Google and Disney and other big brands, and just have them talk about their lived experience on the show. So that's been another great thing for me to understand at a higher level what are all the things that we need to do to become a creative leader. And I wanted to pause for just a minute here. This is probably an eye chart, but a lot of people who are trying to get into the field of creativity are like, where do I start? How do I become a creative director? How do I get into all this stuff? And in my experience over the years, these are all the paths that you have. Like, the first half on the left is really going to be about the craft, right? You're either going to start out as an art director, a designer, or maybe a strategist or a writer, whatever it is, and you're going to work your way up when you get into the system and really fine-tune everything and learn everything you can. Read those one-show books. Read whatever it is, on photography, everything you can do. Take all the online courses you can and at school here and do everything you possibly can and get better and better and better until you're a senior creative in whatever discipline. And then it's usually there's a big decision. There's a big chasm. Because when you move over into, let's say, the leadership track up the middle, there are so many soft skills that you need to understand. And if you want more on it, you can go to my website. There's plenty of content on how do I become a creative director, or how do I become a fellow. And whether you're going the freelance road or an individual expert or the management track, there's just so much more to learn on soft skills. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on some of those soft skills and things that we need on that management track. But I wanted to come back, again, how I trained myself to be a creative. Why is that important? Why am I hitting on it? It's because I was constantly, for decades, focusing my brain on those emotional connections so that, it's just like, you've heard of all the stories where it's like, even someone who's in the military running a radar, they can look at a radar and it just looks like little dots, but just the smallest fluctuation will set them off and they'll totally understand it. Just as like if you right now are training, you're in your MBA, you're training your brain to understand balance sheets, right? Or other elements to try and truly understand everything about that business. So whether you're training yourself about operations or you're training your brain about finance, we are all training ourselves to get better and better and better at some function. And that function is what's going to help us later on in our careers. And I want to talk a little bit more about why creativity is such a superpower. And maybe I go on to it. Let's talk about creative leadership. So today, the big difference from my opinion in business, the big differentiator is the customer experience. And it's not just me saying this. You can go anywhere within marketing or whatever. It's no longer about, do I build a better mousetrap, right? It's all about how am I creating experiences for my customers that are so magical and so impressive that they're loyal and they'll stay with me and they'll spend all their money with me, right? That they care deeply. That is the big differentiator right now in business. If you ask, I don't even know if I'm going to get into some of these. Maybe I'll show you some studies here in a minute that'll prove that out. But it truly is, like, the customer experience is everything. And let's talk about what is an experience. So there's this author, Brian Solis. He wrote this book called X, all about the experience. What I thought was fascinating was his definition of an experience. What is an experience? All right, if this is the era of the experience, what is it? And he said it's an emotional connection to a moment. And I think that's super powerful, an emotional connection to a moment. It's not, I delivered it super fast. It's not, it's all about timely delivery of whatever. Like, it's did I create an emotional connection to that thing? There's another great book we were talking about earlier called The Power of Moments by Dan Heath. And that's super important. Like, think about Disney and those like key principal moments if you go to their park of like what stands out. Because if you look at it objectively, you're standing in lines and having a miserable experience most of the day. But there are a couple key moments that happen of whether it's like the anticipation of when you walk in the park or it's that moment, that one ride that really makes it worthwhile. That emotional connection that we make to that moment, that's what makes it all worth it. That's what is going to make business shine or sink. Because it's really all about those feelings, right? If you go back to my book, it was all about studying emotions and logic and how do they play out in purchasing experiences, right? And there's a famous quote that's like, people will not remember what you do or what you say, but they'll always remember how they felt. And so that's a big part of business. How are you making those customers feel and creating those key moments for them? So I'm going to go through some stats of proving out why creativity is so critical in business. This is an easy first one. They did a study a couple years ago, 1,500 CEOs across the world, all around. And you probably can't see, but what's the question at the top was, what's the most important leadership qualities over the next 5 years? And the number one there at the top was creativity. There are a lot of other studies too. This first one, 211%. That's a statistics that says businesses that focus on creativity earn 211% more compared to the S&P. Like, they're just more profitable. Lifetime value, there was another study in Europe where they found that if a company focuses on experiences and emotions, they'll get 306% back because they feel something. They're going to stick with you, right? First impressions, 94% of first impressions are design related. People care about what it looks like, what it feels like, how it connects with you. In sales situations, this one from 23% was from Qualtrics, that Businesses that focus on good experiences will have 23% sales lift. Also at Adobe, we did some studies on this, on creativity and how important it is to the bottom line. And these are just some of the stats we found. 1.7x for customer retention, lifetime value, revenue growth, happy employees, acquisitions. Across the board, every single metric in all of our studies have come back and said that if you have emotional, creative experiences that people can feel, that's the impact on your bottom line. That's the impact on how much money you're gonna make. So it's real. It's no longer, it's like, for me, it's been validating, because in the early 90s, it was like, we knew we were creating great experiences, but we didn't know why. We didn't know what value would come from it, and it's like, finally, the data has caught up with us, and now we know that it's not just, we wanna make things stickier, we wanna make things memorable. It absolutely works, and we have hard data that it's gonna improve the business. It's gonna give you more money. So, from all of those studies, the baseline is creativity will help with increased business success. Now I want to talk a little bit about like why creative leaders then. So you could be running a company and say, okay, I see the value of it, so I just want to, I'll farm out and make sure that the ad agency or whoever's doing my design does a really good job, and then I'm set, check mark. But I want to talk about why creative leadership is important in your business. So as you eventually create your business, or you are doing a startup, whatever you may be doing, why should you think twice about making sure you have someone who has the experience of creativity? Again, think of like and this is not something you just like decide, oh, I want to be creative. It took me 20 years to figure it out. 20 years of day in, day out focusing on emotional experiences. It's not like you can just say, I feel like I want to try it this way, whatever. It's all about what you train yourself on, right? So let's talk about what creative leaders do that's different. So this is McKinsey. If you guys ever heard of McKinsey, it's one of the world-renowned marketing research firms, and they did this study just recently on what are the qualities of creative leadership that's different, that makes an impact on business. Number one, they hardwire creativity in their daily practice. Because when you're a creative, if you remember that creative class thing, they didn't have a choice. It was a part of their DNA. They're like, I have to have more glitter, right? I have to have more design and beautiful art and beautiful colors. It's not a question. Whereas in many businesses, like Russell's old boss, it was an option. We don't have to have creativity, or we can. We'll be fine either way. But with creative leaders, there's no choice. They're going to do it. Number two, they're customer fanatics. And why is that? Because they have been focusing on emotional experiences, and digging into that their whole lives. They're trained on it. That's what they think about. They're going to focus on that in every experience. Next, they're fast at turning insights to action. Why is that? Like you hear all the time, you got to pivot in business, right? Things aren't going well, you got to change things up, try something new. And that was very clear in the last 2 years of the pandemic. Companies that didn't adapt and pivot failed, right? Why are creative leaders better at this? Because for decades, when I was coming up with idea after idea after idea after idea after idea, and seeing all of my children slaughtered in front of me, and then I'd have to come up with more and more and more ideas and then see them all killed, it was just a thing that happened. Like, I come up with ideas all the time. Ideas are cheap. I can come up with hundreds of ideas, right? And I'm fast at coming into those insights and then turning it and pivoting on that. Whereas there are a lot of people who are like, I get one idea and I focus on that forever and ever and ever and just drive it and drive it, which is also a good thing. Some people are successful at driving that, but we're great at understanding the value of lots of good ideas. And then finally, creative leaders create and manage great ecosystems. Meaning when you're a startup and you need to move fast, we are usually good at knowing a designer here, a photographer there, or a thing here, if we need to get something done. Like, we have a good ecosystem of making sure all that stuff comes together. So why is this a great opportunity? If you look right now in business, this is me getting on my soapbox here for a minute. If you look at business right now, predominantly all the leaders on boards of directors most likely came from an operations or a finance background. So what have they trained their brains on their whole lives? Money and data, right? And numbers. Numbers, money, which has been phenomenal. And I would say if you have a business strategy that's operational efficiency, great. But if you have one of the other two business strategies, like customer intimacy or product innovation, you're missing a huge opportunity, because I think you need to have a creative leader on your board of directors. Why? Because they've trained themselves to understand the human condition. They've trained themselves to connect with customers in a deep way. And if today is the era of experience, if today the way you differentiate is the way you create those moments for your customers, you're not going to get there solely by numbers and data. That's just part of the equation. So I want to just put that out there, that We need more and more creative leaders. And I think the design-led movement 10 years ago changed some things. And now we start thinking of things of like innovation or pivoting or all these other words, right? Let's see if I have a quote on that. Yeah. Innovating, pivoting, adapting. Those are all just different definitions of creativity in my mind. Like at Adobe, when we do studies and try and talk with CEOs of big business, B2B companies or tech companies, they get a little weird when you start talking creativity. Oh, that's the arts and crafts stuff. And it's not. Like when I'm talking about creativity, capital C creativity, I'm talking about people who have cared deeply about that and are focused on those experiences so that when the time comes for you to create a better brand experience, you have someone on your team, a partner, who can relate to all of that and can help you be more successful. It's not replacing data. I know we're in a huge data-driven culture, but it's a part of it. So this is one of my most famous quotes by Bill Bernbach, like the father of advertising, and he said, "We're so busy measuring public opinion, we forget we can create it." That's so critical to me, because as I have grown up knowing there's always another idea out there around the corner, creativity is looking at it from different angles and trying and looking at it and finding those other ideas. So take all the data you can, learn the audience, learn everything you're about, but you have to have that creative act in order to create that new experience or something different and to adapt. So anyhow, I'm just gonna leave that with you as a choice. Today, you can either become a creative leader by training your brain, going out there and soaking up culture and experiences and how people react and what people care about and what their triggers are and why. Because that's truly the heart of any great marketing campaign or any great experience, right? Is to truly understand what people care about and then give that to them. So you can either do that and take your time to do it, and if you're not, and if you're just gonna be like, nope, I'm all in on operations or finance, great, that's not a problem. But find someone, sorry, I'm spitting all over. Find someone who's doing that and partner with them, because you need both of those experiences in order to succeed today. Never forget the power, the superpower of creativity. Thank you. And I guess now it's Q&A time, right? So how do you guys handle this? Do you have someone just reach out and holler, and then I'll repeat the question? Okay. Anyone? There we go, a brave soul.
So you briefly talked about your college experience, and you talked about how you changed a little bit of your focus, and I don't know if that was during college or after. So did you change your major?
I did. I did a year of chemical engineering, and then I said, oh, this is not, like, I need to come up with ideas faster. And so I went through the whole list of all the different majors, and the one that I landed on was advertising. So I did advertising and a minor in business. And that's where I focused, creating ideas, yeah. Sorry, the question is, how did you change? Did you change after college or before? And it was during college that I changed.
So you've talked a lot about being creative really is figuring out the emotional figuring out how to connect emotionally with people. Would you say that there's like different types of creativity, or is it more? It's just a general. You are creative.
There are absolutely different types. Like if we're talking capital C creativity, at Adobe we have a saying that is creativity for all, right? And what we mean behind that is every human being is creative. No one has a special brain. Like I was at some training a couple years ago, and there was a guy who was an engineer sitting next to me, and I introduced myself and my title. He's like, oh, creativity, oh. I'm not that at all. I'm not an ounce of it is in me. And in my mind, I'm like, it used to be, but you've just trained yourself to really focus on engineering in such an analytical way that you've just kind of drowned it out. It's like a muscle, right? Everyone can be creative. We all have the same brains. It's just how much effort do you put into that? Now, that's capital C creativity, because I still feel like if you're a data engineer, there are creative acts that you have to make. You're going to find some little insight or try something new or look at it from another angle. You know, people are always attacking things in a creative fashion. So everyone is creative, and there are a lot of ways we're doing it. Mostly what I was talking about is creativity in a business sense. And most often that's expressed through marketing and customer experiences. And so there are a lot of ways to express creativity, and it's all great. I'm just saying in business, the way you focus on creativity is through having great customer experiences. Okay, what are the top 3 ways you can train your brain to be creative? First, I would say, there's a saying that I have, which is, if you want to lead, you have to read. And I really think that's important. There was some other stat I just saw recently that was like, after high school, like 50% of the people never read a book again. After college, like another 30% never read a book again. And those who read like a whole bunch of books are usually the top leaders, scholars, whatever. So I would tell you a few books that you should probably read to help you. One is called Jumpstart Your Brain by Doug Hall. And that one's all about how do you come up with ideas faster? How do you make connections faster? We've all heard about brainstorming, and if ever you have a brainstorming meeting with people coming together, that is the worst idea you could ever think of doing. In 27 years, I've never had a good brainstorming session with people out loud. What you do is you go off and you make connections, come up with ideas, and then you come back together and you test them out on each other and escalate and build off of them. So that book will help you come up with tons of ideas faster and be able to escalate them quicker. So that's one good way of being creative. The next thing I would say is you have to be an observer of the human condition. So a lot of times they say like writers or videographers, right? They're just sitting back in a public area just watching people and seeing how they react, talking with people, just seeing what a typical customer journey would be with a brand or with an experience, right? You have to become a student of that. You have to just really understand the nuances of why people react in different ways and why they're attracted to certain things. And that bleeds into pop culture and movies and, stories and books and everything else that people are all into, right? We'll get all these studies where it's like, oh, IT people are all, like, they're direct and they don't want any marketing, right? They don't have any emotion. Just tell them what it is and be done. But I guarantee many of the developers I met, the latest Marvel movie comes out and they're going to geek out and be watching, the trailer, so they care about emotional experiences as much as anyone. So looking at different audiences and how they react to things, that's number 2. Number 3, you have to just experiment, right? If you're not building stuff at a fast frequency, and that's what helped me being at an agency, is I could do that a lot and very quickly. Find an environment where you can experiment and try things again and again and again and again and pivot and try and do everything else. So those are probably 3 just off the top of my head of what I would do to become more creative and train my brain to be more creative. What work do I do?
What work did you do to start your podcast?
That's a good question. I guess the first thing I did is made a goal. I remember one year I'm like, all right, I would like to build a podcast, and I'm going to do 8 episodes. That's what I said. And then I had a vision for it. I did a lot of work in what was the idea behind it. And then I did a crazy thing. I went to an agency that was partnering with me, and I pitched them that idea of exactly what I was going to do. And they were like, we're in, we're all in. And the reason why that was critical is because I've built a lot of things on my own and it takes forever. But by working with this agency, we partner now, we own it together, and I'll come up with all the content, I'll record, episodes and things, then I send it over to them, and they do all the video editing and all the promotional stuff, and they have my social accounts and just like go crazy with all of it, right? So if there's any leads that come off it, they get the leads because I don't want anything to do with consulting. I want nothing to do with it. They can have it all, and then I just build the audience with them. So that's how I built it, is just pitching it to the right people and getting the right partners, and then together we had like some early meetings. Okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Like, we just built a system, and now there's a dedicated team on that agency to the podcast. We meet every week, and we go over what we're doing next for this next episode. What big wig at some tech company are we going to approach and get on the show? And it's just become a production, which is great. So I'm going to look at the back because I keep looking at people up at the front. Is there anyone in the back? Here we go. With the tan and furry collar. I can't even see from here.
So you have all these creative ideas. What are some ways that you found to try to convince people to try out new ideas, or can you, in your experience?
Oh, yes. Everyone is a salesperson, right? Everyone. And over my career, I have pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched ideas since day one. How do you successfully pitch an idea? Here's some of the tricks that I've used that are super helpful. Because you could come up with some random idea that relates nothing to your audience, right? You need to know your audience first. What do they care about? What are their goals? What are they going after in their business? And usually before every big pitch, I would go back and say, okay, what are 3 to 5 reasons that this person that I'm pitching to would care? Do they have a certain goal? I'm going to tie the value of this to that goal. Or do they have something that's one of their trigger things? How can I tie that to this? So I would go in knowing exactly what they care about and make sure that I pitched ahead of time, here are all the reasons why this aligns with your vision and your goals. And that's helped immensely, so that it's not just me saying, hey, here's this cool idea. What do you think? You got to know your audience ahead of time. That's one of the key things in marketing and advertising. Know who you're talking to, know how they'll receive that, and then how you can adapt and sell it to them in the right way. That help? Okay. Right here in the middle.
I was just wondering, what has your experience been like in learning to do it? It's hard to find that balance between creativity and business. What would kind of be your advice?
Okay, so his question is, how do you find that balance between creativity and business? Because I would say for most people, you may have a creative act. You like art, you like drawing, you like photography, whatever it is, and that's your outlet, your creative outlet. And then once you turn it into a business, suddenly it sucks, and then you don't want to do it, right? And it's terrible. That is a hard one, and I still have creative outlets. Like for me, I've just had to compartmentalize. Like if I want to work on writing a book or my podcast or other things, like that's a creative outlet that I have 100% control over. And I think most creative people want to have something they have full control over. But then I had to learn very quickly that all of the other ideas that I was going to put out there, people were going to hate, people were going to tell me how to do it better. People were going to tell you, no, you got to do it this way, or everyone's a critic. Everyone's a critic. And I don't know if you've heard, what is the Theodore Roosevelt quote about being in the arena, if you guys have ever heard that. But it's like, all the people in the cheap seats can say all they want, but until you're bloodied and battled in the arena, you just don't understand. And I think that is a hard challenge for creatives their whole career. But you really have to get thick skin. For me, being in advertising, it helped to have my ideas killed constantly, right? My designs, my ideas, whatever, they're just like, that's terrible. And the reason why that's so important is because if you don't have the critique, you're not going to get better. You're just going to keep doing and bumbling along, doing it the way you do it, and maybe you'll get, somewhat better. But I think you get better faster if you have a mentor or someone who's critiquing your work and showing you where you can do better. So for me, it absolutely helped by getting a job where I was going to get critiqued by a creative director and someone who's been in the arena before me to give me guidance of how to improve and get better. And it was absolutely, like for the first 10 years of my career, critical. And then I could quickly understand, okay, in business, there are all these opinions and all these stakeholders and all these clients that care about totally different things, and it's really, really hard, and I have no control. So what I can control is I can come up with better ideas, I can listen, I can adapt, I can change, and those are the skills that make you a great creative leader, but you have to go through those steps. So I think that's an important part. Just get ready to just have other people tell you what to do for a while. And maybe if that drives you crazy, always have an outlet. Like every human that I know in the creative department has had a creative itch, and they're working on a screenplay or they're working on a book or something else on the side, and that's fine. So you can have your vacation stuff, but then you have to put stuff out there into the world. And don't be afraid. Put something out in the world and make sure you get critique, and then you'll get better.
So along those same lines, I feel like it's kind of hard for people to get a critique and like emotionally separate themselves from their work. Like, so I'm in the landscape architecture program, and we do critiques all the time. The first time we did it, it was like heart-wrenching.
Yes.
Like, you work so hard on this, and you get emotionally attached to it, and then they just tear it apart and tell you why it's all wrong. So what's your thought, like, how do you think the best way to separate yourself from your work, like emotionally, so you don't feel terrible when it
There are a lot of good books that you can start with. I think there's one called The War of Art that really just helps you understand that you don't need to put your personal value into that work. Like you need to separate it and understand that you have value, you have ideas. And it is really hard early on, I think, to get those two tangled up, right? That's why I was devastated in my early years in the mid-90s of all my ideas being killed in front of me and all that critique. And then, my natural instinct was to fight back and say, you don't know anything. This was a brilliant idea. I came up with it. But from perspective, they were looking and saying, yeah, someone else did that 10 years ago. Someone else did that 5 years ago. It's old stuff here, right? But you don't know that because you haven't learned that yet. So number one, like I said before, learn everything you can, soak up and absorb everything you possibly can, but then understand that you do have value and you do have a unique voice in this world and that you have a story to tell. But the more you can just be good at saying, I can come up with another one. Don't pin your whole career on one idea or on one drawing or one design or one whatever. You can always come up with new ideas. Ideas are cheap. You've just got to keep focusing on strengthening those muscles of coming up with more. And those are the people who will shine eventually, is to let go of the ego, put your ego in yourself, not in your work, and just keep trying and trying and trying and learning new things. So it sucks. It sucks hard, but that's the only way. And you need that critique because you think you know everything and you don't. And it's really important to be humbled and build that thick skin so that later on for me, when it's business and design and everything and people are poo-pooing all this stuff, like I can look for the elements that are good and let those shine and then scratch away all the stuff that everyone's having problems with and really focus it onto a better idea or a better story and get everyone on board. And you have to have the grit to get there. I don't even know how much time we're at. Where are we at? A few more minutes. Okay, a couple more questions. All right, we've got one here.
So is your background in like creativity and having that kind of build everything you do with your life? Have you seen that affect like your everyday outside of work life?
I don't know, we should ask my daughter. Has creativity affected my life in how I act and do things? I don't know. Probably. Yeah, whatever. I'm just putting her on the spot. Absolutely. And, I always get all these comments of like, oh, you're the creative guy. And I'm like, I guess, I have trained myself to do that forever and ever. But it does. It makes you look at the world in a different way. When someone's really upset and people are having a fight, you're more thinking about, oh, I wonder how they got into that and what is the story behind, or maybe I'm just going to just block it out because I can see their mouths moving and I'll start coming up with a dialogue for myself. Like, you just start to go in this like other world of just like thinking about things in different ways and coming up with stories. And like, I was even just listening to a book on the way up here and I had to stop and pull over, book on tape, and like take down notes because I'm like, that's an awesome character in a book for someday. Like, that guy right there. I want to do something about that. So you just like, I have notebooks. Like, have you guys ever, maybe the movie Seven, where they find the crazy guy in his lair and he has like notebook after notebook after notebook with all this crazy gibberish things written in there? I feel like that's me sometimes because since 1995, I have spiral-bound notebooks and I have tons and tons and tons of them, and I just always have a notebook with me writing down ideas and doing things, whether it's a idea for a movie, a book, or whatever. It's just always writing it down. So it does affect you for sure. You just start to think in a different way at the world and observe the world in a different way. All right. Let me just look at the back one more time. I don't see any in the back. So right up here first, and then there's one there.
So how do you work with being creative on a time limit?
How do you work with being creative on a time limit? Practice. So early on in my career, I remember one of my first creative directors, I had some assignment and I was supposed to come up with some ads, right? And I had worked for a week on it. Thinking, writing hundreds of ideas out, and I came up with my best, like 10, and I went and presented them to him. And he had not been thinking about this at all, right? And he just looked at him and said, nope, this one has potential. Why don't you try this? And he wrote a line, or this other idea over here. And I was just like, how did you come up with that so fast? I've been working on this for a week, and you're just like ripping it off like that. And it blew my mind at that time because I'm like, he is so fast. Read that book, Jumpstart Your Brain. After learning some of those methods, I was like, I'm going to just try this out. And I've even done it with people who are veterans, and they'll try one of the different, double list association method, and all of a sudden they're like, what? I have ideas that fast? Like, this is crazy. But it just takes practice of trying it. And then later on, I remember there was another moment, 15 years later, where some young creative team came to me and presented some stuff, and I was like, try this or this or this or this, and they were just like, how did you come? It's just practice and timing. Like, that's what training your brain is. So you will get faster. It's a muscle, but it takes exercise. It's not going to come fast at first. There was one more, and then I think we're done, right? Right here.
So you've been working with Adobe, and you are currently, and you have a lot of association with their brand, but it's also pretty prevalent that you're creating your own brand, and you are your own brand. You have your podcast, you have your different
and a business in and of itself is what I'm getting at. But I was just kind of curious, like, what's your 5, 7, 10-year plan? Like, where do you see yourself over those next timelines, and in your?
You want to know my business plans? Maybe I could share. Like, first and foremost, I have a great relationship with Adobe in that, as I do all this outside stuff, and most of it's for free, right? It's just me wanting to be engaged. They are great with it. They're like, we'd rather have Adam out there speaking, representing Adobe, than just Adam being some schlub on the street, right? They're like, as long as there's no like I'm stealing or selling stuff from Adobe on the side or trying to do whatever, like, which I'm not, right? So I had to get it all, we had to run it through their legal department, make sure there's no conflict of interest, and it all checked out. So that relationship is great. And the reason why I say that is because Adobe takes really good care of me, and I have no plans of walking away from that right now, unless I went to some other company and they paid me just as much, right? So I have a retirement plan based on that. I also have a plan, like, if you tell me what I really want to do when I grow up, I want to be a slumlord. I want to be a landlord and have a bunch of properties. That's what I'm building towards, right, on my side. As far as this real creative leadership and other stuff, maybe there, there was once an offer for $1 million for it, and I thought maybe I'd do it, and then it went away. But it made me think, okay, I'll keep building that because there'll be value in it someday. I don't know when. I get more off of the speaking gigs than I do any of the other stuff, but I guess it's still just building a platform. So I don't know. Right now, that's not in the plans. That's just more of a for funsies on the side. All right, we're done.
So many of these students want to develop a creative brain and enter the field of the arts or some creative endeavor. What would you recommend they do during college? What classes, what minors, majors?
Okay.
Prepare them to be like you. What would you recommend they do now?
So the question is, what can you do now while you're in college? If you want to go in a creative career, what can you do now to prepare? And I've said some of the things. Read your guts out. If you want, come connect with me. My email's up there. I will send you a book list of all these great creative books and marketing or strategy books and whatever else, writing books. I will send you a list. And the number one thing I would say, I don't know what classes you have here at this university, but take anything and everything you possibly can to help learn some of those skills. If you have, like, I'm sure in some of your entrepreneur classes or the Hive or whatever it is where you're trying things and looking for different ways of doing things, great. Take advantage of everything you can at the university and then go soak your, like, this is your time right now. If you want to be great, you have to put in the effort now. You've got to soak up everything you possibly can, whether that's through classes, education, following podcasts, getting involved with different, podcasts and groups, listening and absorbing everything you possibly can. That's how you're going to fill your brain with enough fodder to finally start to make new connections later on. And this is the perfect opportunity for you to do that. And I know it's easy to be in college and just screw around and have fun, but honestly, you just need to set aside and make some good habits of soaking in as much as you can from reading, listening, going to classes, whatever it may be. I don't know if there's a perfect answer for a class, but anything to do with creativity is what I would do. All right, well, thank you.
Enjoy that Utah State swag.